Welcome, friends, to Divine Decode, the listening space where we slow down and reflect on the intelligence woven into our everyday lives. I am Pragya, and tonight's conversation invites us to look at dentistry not just as a clinical craft, but as a living art form. Our guest, Dr. Edward, has spent decades pioneering what's possible in dental medicine. As director of the Onward Program and mentor to countless professionals, Dr. Edward has blended precision, creativity, and heart into every aspect of his work. Dr. Edward, thank you for being here. It's truly an honor to host someone who sees healing as both science and art. And I'm really looking forward for this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it very much.
Okay, doctor. So dentistry, it sometimes gets boxed in a very clinical, numerical, and measurement procedures, right? But I've noticed that the very practitioners, they seem to bring a lot and almost a painter's touch to it. Everybody has their own touch to it, or a healer's intuition to it. And for you, how do artistry and soul infuse a field which is so defined by precision and technique? And how do you bring your artistry and your soul and your creativity into the room?
Well, dentistry is a very unique field in that it's half art and half science. And it has so many different facets to it. You have to know something about um, uh, health and healing and anatomy of the mouth. You have to know something about business. You have to know something about materials and engineering and science. And you also have to be almost a psychologist to handle people and to help them. And sometimes it's important that you help them not only with their dentistry, but with things that are really bothering them, and you can maybe steer them to the right place. And then dentistry is also artistic in that you are changing somebody's appearance and how they might feel about themselves, and that in turn can really change somebody's life.
That makes sense. And that is actually beautiful.
The art part of dentistry is very much overemphasized. And the health part of dentistry, I think, is critically important, and the two have to go hand in hand. So, my major focus really is about health. And whatever I'm trying to do, I would like to prevent the patients from having future trouble. And what does it for me as a dentist is that I get to watch my patients come in year after year for their hygiene visits and watch the work that I did lasted for many years in health, sometimes decades in health, and very few changes in their x-rays over that period of time. That is what I try and strive for each of my patients.
True, true, true. That's a true addition. And I love that. I love that. Yeah, I wanted to know, was there a moment along your journey throughout dentistry where you realized that, fixing teeth and, working on people, it barely touches the surface of what dentistry is really about. And it's much more deeper than that. And yeah, what is the umbrella concept of it?
Well, I grew up in dentistry. My father was a master and pioneer of full mouth reconstruction and crown and bridge dentistry. I learned everything from him. He was an absolute master and a genius. And I can tell you that the work that he did in the course of his lifetime is unmatched by anybody, even with all their technology. They could never do what he did. And I can talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But that he was my mentor, and I was trained completely differently from everybody else. And what I'm doing really comes from the roots of dentistry and has the track record. And I'm watching everyone else in the profession, every single dental school and every single dental institute going in a different direction that did not come from dentistry's roots. So there are a lot of dentists who are having great difficulty with crown and bridge, specifically with crowns falling out and decay happening under crowns. And these are problems that were solved in the 1930s. My dad and I and my dad's teacher never had these problems. So what I really teach is basic principles that contribute to health and prevention of these problems. And what I see is so many dentists do not have confidence in their crown and bridge skills that they would just rather extract the teeth and put implants in wherever they can, because there are a lot of people who can do good implants, but there are fewer and fewer people who can do good crown and bridge. And most of the time, crown and bridge is a better choice than implants, no matter what anyone says.
That is that is insightful. Thank you for that. And yeah, I love that. I love that. Also, it's fascinating, how these patient stories and their hopes, their anxieties, they become and they are much as a part of healing stories and tools. And that's just an addition from my side, as I feel, and I've been through the path of uh, being a patient myself, and I've had braces from a long, long time ago, and that is what I know about dentistry, wherein it actually requires a lot of patience. It actually is much, much more than what we see or what we read.
Yes, it's very difficult to make dentistry. Everything has to be in tenths of millimeters. If you want to have a high percentage of success, you have to have picayune attention to detail. One of the things that my dad always said was that one of the hardest things is to be your own worst critic, because no one is standing over your shoulder. Are you going to pass along that faulty impression with some cop out like, oh, well, that's the best I can do, or we'll have to see what happens? That's not fair. Bacteria are microns and you won't get away with it. And the patient is counting on you to do right by them. They have no idea what you're doing. So, really, being your own worst critic is a very, very difficult skill to master. And the more you master it, the higher percentage of success you are going to have. So that's what I see, that a lot of practitioners now, they don't want to do precision. They want quick and easy, put something in, make a quick buck. That's what they're looking for. And that's not how I was raised. And I don't think that those attitudes should be in healthcare.
So true, so true. I deeply and I actually very much agree to your point. And everything requires, that patience and the skill and that interest in it, wherein, you're actually enjoying doing something and you're putting your level best and your potential. That's actually nice. You lead the Onward program, right? Which is empowering dentists with both dentist and like both techniques and a vision and the idea of dentistry. So what inspired you to create this kind of space for professional growth, and yeah, how was the journey?
Well, I was trained by a master and somebody helped me, and I think it's my obligation to try to help others and get them on the right path. I don't like a lot of what I see going on in my profession, and I know it's wrong. What I really teach are basic principles. These are not being taught in the dental schools, unfortunately. And so a lot of practitioners have no idea what they're doing. And they look at crown and bridge as nothing more than tooth coverings, and they think all crown and bridge is likely to fail. I have 100,000 pictures of crown and bridge cases that span over 70 years that says that that's not true when done properly according to basic principles. Crown and bridge has a better track record than implants, which haven't been around as long. And one of the things that I see is that a lot of dentists, they think of crown and bridge as nothing more than tooth coverings, when in reality, you are incorporating basic principles of engineering. So, for example, what I mean by that is that in dentistry, the whole ball game is that determines whether or not you're going to hold on to your teeth is the bone and the roots. And there are different things that can contribute to bone loss. The first everybody knows is letting tartar and plaque and calculus build up, because that can cause the gums to become inflamed, and that can spread to the underlying bone. So the single best thing that anyone can do for their oral health is to have regular hygiene, because it removes that one factor that we know causes bone loss. And another factor that we know causes bone loss is poor architecture, or architecture where the teeth take forces in abnormal directions. When the body can't tolerate that, then something gives. When patients have missing teeth, for example, teeth around the spaces tend to drift, and teeth opposite the spaces tend to erupt into the space. And when they start taking forces in abnormal directions, no one knows when the body's not going to tolerate that. And when the body can't tolerate it, either the bone disappears or the teeth wear. And once the bone disappears, we don't know how to grow it back. So everything that we do is prevention. So crown and bridge is really engineering, because you are changing the architecture to minimize the forces on the bone and the roots, to bring the forces up close to the supporting structures. So when you look at my finished x-rays, it looks like the crowns and bridges are sitting on the bone. They're not, of course, but they're as close as you can get them. And then very often I tie some of the teeth together so that they help each other out, rather than each tooth having to carry the load by itself, or taking the chance on opening up a food impaction space, which can cause rapidly cause damage. So crown and bridge is corrective. And a lot of times when you do this, that is the end of the periodontal bone loss. And one of the things that makes this superior to, let's say, a single tooth implant is that you are compensating for the problems in the whole area. A single tooth implant only fills a space. So where that's appropriate would be in somebody that has a perfect mouth with, let's say, a missing tooth, but there's no periodontal bone loss and there are no fillings or crowns or anything else. That is not what you see when you go to the lectures. If you take a look at where they're placing single tooth implants, you will see the teeth around the space have periodontal bone loss. They have big fillings. They have crowns. They're going to need crowns. And so that doesn't make sense. The single tooth implant does nothing for the teeth around it, and the patient's problems are never solved. Whereas if you can do bridge work, that can solve the problem in the entire area, and that's the end of it. So what I want to do is solve the patient's problem and help them so they can maintain their teeth and not have to lose them. And nobody goes to their dentist to have implants. They go to save their teeth. And that would be my main goal for them, is to save teeth first. Except in certain circumstances, implants should be a last resort. And I'm seeing a lot of invasive treatments where they're done as a first resort, and I think it's wrong.
And that is actually a fresh take because, as you mentioned, implants, them being the first take, because a lot of times, a lot of professionals and a lot of practitioners, what I believe, they just sometimes somehow miss the very essence of it, I feel. They're not going deep into what the patient actually needs and what better could be done. Rather, they just go for something which is very convenient for them. And I think that's the mindset that happens.
Yes. And, I believe very strongly that patients should have choices. When a patient comes to me, I want to tell them what's good, what's bad, what their choices are, and what I think they should do. And then they can make better decisions for themselves. And I see patients not being given choices. So the practitioner who only knows how to do implants is what I would call a one-trick pony. And what I see with patients is very often they think that all dentists are the same. And we're just like the physicians, we have good, bad, everything in between, every level of skill and knowledge in between. And so that's not true at all. So they're apt to accept whatever their dentist tells them. Whereas if they had a medical condition, everyone seems to accept the idea of getting a second opinion before they have any major treatments done. And dentists are the same thing. So if one person, this is my message to the patients, if one dentist tells them something that they don't like, they should get second opinions, because if somebody can't save their teeth, maybe another person can. And I have documented miracles that I've done for people. One of the great things about my father was that he practiced before implants came to this country in the early 80s. And he broke his neck to save teeth that almost everybody would extract today. And a lot of those cases worked, because when you remove all of the deleterious forces, you would be surprised what nature will give back. And you can set up the mouth on a temporary level to evaluate it before you make anything, and not be so quick to jump into all this invasive treatment. But that's not what I see. I see patients being talked into doing very invasive treatments. And one invasive treatment that I'm absolutely against is this thing called all on four. And I've seen some horrendous things with that, because what they do is they pull out all the teeth in the arch, and they have to flatten the ridges. And then they put 4 implant fixtures into the bone, 2 in the front and 2 in the back. And then they build this big superstructure that not only replaces the missing teeth, but also replaces the missing gum and bone. And these superstructures are often much too large and put too much forces on these fixtures that are clearly not designed to support that. And they make it impossible for the patient to clean around them. The absolute experts in implant therapy would never tell you you should do that. But that is what they're doing because it's easier for them. And I have to admit, they're very aesthetic. But it isn't fair, because down the road, if that case fails, that patient is screwed. And very often, if they may not be able to have additional implants, and because the ridges are flattened, they might not even be able to wear a denture. And I don't think that's right. I think that whatever we do, we should have some kind of contingency plan for the patient in the event that something goes wrong, because we're not gods and things do go wrong. I can tell you right away that implants are not lifetime. We started doing them in the early 80s, and I've had the patient where they only lasted 20 years and that was it. And they couldn't have any more. I've had those patients. And so I feel very strongly that you have to take all of these things into consideration and not do these kinds of cases, especially on young people. I saw one of the dentists presented at a lecture, and they presented this patient, and she had a great mouth, except she went to a terrible dentist and they did lousy root canals on her and they had to be retreated. And this root canal specialist, who happened to be an excellent practitioner, he wanted to give her a break and redo them. And somebody talked her into having all her teeth extracted in one of these all-on-4 cases placed. That patient was 23 years old, and they didn't even give a second thought about what would happen to that patient down the road. And if all of that fails, what's going to happen to that patient's life, that patient's self-esteem, their ability to navigate socially, and everything that goes along with that. And I think that's wrong. That's horrible. I was horrified when I see this going on. And patients have the misconception that if they have these implant cases, all their problems are going to be solved and they don't ever have any more problems again. That is so not true. In fact, I think the opposite is true. That's my opinion. And because, everything is based on engineering, and dentistry really is akin to engineering. When I give presentations, I like to show famous engineering disasters and their counterparts in the mouth, because the same forces and overloading of forces happens on an engineered structure like a bridge across the river, also happens in the mouth. Exactly the same thing. And you can't violate basic principles of engineering and expect that you're not going to have a failure. Yes, you might get 1 or 2 people that will be able to tolerate it and it holds up. But if you take 100 patients, how many are going to hold up? what percentage of success are you going to have? I think that's a very, very important consideration. And I think that all of the factors should be looked at carefully. And when I see people that all they know how to do is implants, I see them being overused and used inappropriately. That is what I'm against, because where they're indicated, they're wonderful restorations. They can really help people in a lot of great ways. But you have to follow basic principles of engineering. And if there isn't enough bone to put in good implants that can actually support the restoration, they shouldn't be done. There are some other approaches that can help. And I have those approaches that came from dentistry's roots that nobody really knows anything about, like the double tilt precision attachment case, which I wrote a textbook on. And that is probably one of the finest treatment options in dentistry, and it has a track record that goes back to the roots of dentistry. It was invented in 1906, and nobody knows anything about it. And a lot of practitioners aren't even interested, which really, it's really very upsetting because we like to think we're advancing. And I love technology, but there's a lot of bad technology. What makes technology bad is when it violates basic principles. Technology that is good conforms to basic principles and makes things easier. So I look at technology through the lens of basic principles. And I can tell right away whether it's any good or not. Sometimes it's a gimmick, and patients are overly impressed. Oh, teeth in a day. That's crappy dentistry. And nobody wants to admit that. Yes, it is cool technology. There's no question about it. And I'm not saying all technology is bad, because there's a lot of technology that's good. But I really believe that if we're going to advance scientifically, anything new that comes down the pike must be compared to the standard that came before, or we are not advancing. And in my area of dentistry, that is not being done.
That's a lot and very insightful. I totally agree to a lot of points that you've said, and it's actually everything that you said, which is very very important. And this is the guiding light that the new practitioners that are coming up, and the young dentists which are stepping into this field, they follow, and they should actually take insights and learn the basics of this and learn the principles and the soul of the dentistry, which is the way you do everything, right? You just learn and
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
meet the soul of. Yeah.
And in all fairness, the schools have to teach the students something so they can get out and do something. But they neglect to tell them that your education begins the day you graduate, and that we showed you a way, but it is not the only way nor even the best way. And it's up to you to continue your education. They neglect to tell them that. So when you get out of school, they think they know everything, and they think they learned everything they need to know in dental school. And nothing could be further from the truth. That is a very poor attitude. And, if you want to be good, it's going to take a lifetime of study and diligent attention to details to be really good. My dad, when he started out, he always said, I want to be the best dentist. And I don't hear so much of that today. I hear, oh, I need to make a lot of money to pay back all these loans, which is terrible for students. Or they're focused on, uh, economics and workflow. Whereas when I graduated, I was focused on health and longevity. I think that's what dentistry is really about. And that's what does it for me. I want to see those cases hold up. I want to keep that patient for a lifetime. I want them to refer their family and friends who are having lots of problems with their mouth. They know they got something special if they have dentistry that's in the mouth 20 years, because there aren't too many around who can do that. Less and less and less.
So true, so true. And that is actually so inspiring, because it's a reminder that the roots of mastery, they're invisible, but there has to be some effort to make it visible, and it requires patience, honesty, and pure intention. Thank you for that. Also, I wanted to know that you've written books, and you also mentioned that you're writing a book now. And as you've mentored so many people, leaving fingerprints on the future of dentistry is what you're actually doing and what you've done. I really appreciate that. If you could share a one legacy message, maybe a hope or a call to action or a guiding principle, which is simple yet golden. I mean, it's really important for upcoming practitioners. And yeah, anything from your experience, anything that you would love to share with them.
Well, I can't overemphasize the importance of continuing education and to trying to make yourself better, into not just accepting the status quo or everybody does it this way, because that doesn't make things right. Why are you doing what you're doing? When you go to hear a speaker, is what that person saying make sense? Does he actually do what is he saying? Can he show the evidence for what he's teaching? So I have 100,000 pictures of cases that I can show case after case after case after case that pretty much show what I'm talking about. And I think that's very important. When you go to the lectures, you don't see very much in the way of follow up. How do you know this case worked? So I think there should be at least 5 years of follow-up in order to evaluate anything, and I'm not seeing that. I think the continuing education, authorities are lax in not looking at this more carefully. So they'll show you how pretty a case looks on the day of insertion. That means nothing to me. If that case fails, that patient's screwed. So what I really want for them is to think about what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing, and strive to keep doing better. That would be my message.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And it's profound, how the wisdom that you've shared with us today, it's actually something that, um, would require, would be required for generations ahead. And I hope our listeners, they resonate with it and they actually take up all the insights because you're actually asking and you're making them uh, reflect to this that there is a way you approach an art and there is an approach you have to take for any craft as such. And thank you for reminding us tonight that dentistry and any other craft as such, it actually becomes transcendent when, skills, it meets soul. And to everybody listening, whether you heal smiles, teach children, or write poems, treat your work as both science and as service. And as Dr. Edward had shared with us today, he's actually showed us how science and service can be um, made into one skill and, how can it be treated as an art. And excellence, it blooms at the intersection of what we know and how we care. And that is what I've learned today. This is Pragya Malviya wishing you purpose and presence in all you do. Until next time, keep decoding the divine within your craft and in yourself.